Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Autism Stories. I'm your host, Doug Bletcher, the founder of Autism Personal Coach. Autistic people are the true experts of the autistic experience, and Autism Stories is where we interview autistic people to learn from their diverse stories, experiences, and get their insights. If you would like to be notified about each week's episode of Autism Stories, we suggest you subscribe on your favorite podcast listening platform. Thank you to TR Sun for their song All Good on today's episode. If you'd like to follow along, or if you're like me and seeing the lyrics make listening to music more accessible to you, then check out the link in the podcast description for this episode. In addition to TR Sun, we also have a second completely different musical piece at the end of this episode from previous guest on Autism Stories, Amy Scurria, titled Inside. If you enjoy opera, then you may particularly enjoy this. Now on to today's episode. Anthony Leckie joins us to discuss being the editor for all the episodes you listen to here on Autism Stories and ethical uses of AI. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Anthony, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining me here on Autism Stories.
Oh, thank you for having me, Doug. I'm glad to be here and I'm grateful for the opportunity.
I'd love to start our conversation today by learning, where does your story in the autistic community begin?
Well, as I've heard many of the guests say, it started, at birth, basically. However, it was 2021, and that's when I got my diagnosis. And that's also, prior to the diagnosis, that's also when I had, accepted that I was on the spectrum. And it was a very interesting journey up to that point. And I'll start around that time and then kind of go back to my early childhood. And I think the earliest I began to think about the possibility that I may be autistic was, I want to say maybe 2018. And at that time, I remember there's just one particular moment that really stuck out to me. It was the first time I think I thought about it, and then I immediately put the thought away because it was a little too much to consider at that time. But I remember seeing an interview with Jerry Seinfeld, and I'm not a huge Seinfeld fan, but I do remember him being interviewed, and the interviewer saying, "You've had this reputation for being a little different and for making these observations that other people don't seem to make, and you're so creative, and do you think you're on the spectrum?" And I remember Jerry Seinfeld said, "Yeah, I think I probably am somewhere on the spectrum." And I remember that really stuck out to me. And a while after that, I just kept processing it and thinking about it, and it was one of those things that stuck in my mind. And at that time, I was really trying to make sense of myself and my life and where I was. And it wasn't that my life was necessarily not going the way that I wanted, but I just had so many unanswered questions, and I felt different from other people. I had very, very intense sensory difficulties. I couldn't stand to be around people when they were eating. The noises of chewing were just so vivid to me, and it was overwhelming. And if I was around other people for too long, talking, just any sort of intense sensory stimulation, the sound of parties or going to concerts or being stuck in traffic, I would routinely reach the place of meltdown, but I didn't know what it was. On the journey of figuring this stuff out, I was in therapy at the time, and I really started to wonder, maybe there's nothing wrong with me. Maybe I don't have a brain that's messed up. Maybe I'm just on the spectrum. And I remember I went to a therapy session with a therapist I've been working with for, I think, a couple years at this point. And we had mainly been working on trauma and healing from trauma and early childhood experiences. And I presented the idea, and I said, I'm really starting to wonder if maybe a good bit of what I'm experiencing is not that there's something wrong with me, not that there's something I need to heal from, but maybe I'm on the spectrum. And this therapist, I can't quote it exactly because I don't remember it exactly, but it was very close to, this therapist said this: Anthony, I've been in practice for 20 years. I have an amazing radar for people on the spectrum. And this is pretty much their words. I have an amazing radar for people on the spectrum. And I can tell you right now, you're wasting your time. You're not on the spectrum. Don't even think about it. You're just about to go down a tangent that you're better just focusing on your healing. Just put this out of your mind. You're wasting your time. And it was definitely it was painful to hear, and it was a blow, and my self-confidence wasn't great. So I put it out of my mind, and I thought, this was probably around 2018, and I thought, well, maybe I do just want to be somebody else, or I want to get away from trauma healing, or so I just put it away, and I said, all right, I guess not. Flash forward a few years, I just had kept working on myself, and I kept having the same feelings of maybe my intense sensitivities and my I was just starting to see more beauty in those experiences, like the way that I connect with things visually, and the very deep way in which I process sensory information, and just in general my approach to life feeling a little bit different from what I see represented in mainstream media and all of that. And I eventually got back to the place of really thinking about it. This was 2021, and that really began my journey of really embracing myself in a new way and seeing myself as a whole person and a well person, somebody who, I did have healing work to do. I certainly had experienced trauma in my life, but I was able to separate what needed to be healed versus just who I was authentically, and understand that there's a lot of me that, kind of my core self, my core personality is valid and legitimate, and doesn't need to be fixed or changed. So yeah, and I wanted to take a little bit of time too, just to go back to kind of my early childhood, and just kind of tie the thread together. But yeah, growing up, both of my parents are neurodivergent. I have no doubt about it. When I got my autism diagnosis in 2021, when I actually went through the process and got assessed through UGA, when I was at UGA, I told my mom about it. And my mom's first response was really, yeah, I think I probably am too. And we kind of looked at our family history, and my mom's dad almost certainly was on the spectrum as well. My father, I don't think he's gotten or not that a diagnosis is necessary. I think self diagnosis is just as valid, just as relevant. But my father fits pretty much all the criteria for ADHD, and I'm ADHD, so I think I kind of got a lot of their features. But yeah, they didn't know that they were neurodivergent, and they didn't think of themselves that way, and I think they masked a lot and had a lot of shame and a lot of confusion. And so as a child, a lot of my development just couldn't really happen because I didn't really have the environment to be supported and really develop into who I was authentically. And so, yeah, really just kind of from that childhood kind of up to where I am today, I would say at age 33, which is how old I was in 2021, I'm 37 now. It's really been a process of rediscovery of self and embracing myself and developing myself in ways I couldn't do in the earlier chapters of my life. So that's kind of really where I'm at and how the journey started.
Now, you have a master's in AV production, and I'm very fortunate to work with you as you've been the editor of Autism Stories podcast for the last year. So, if there are some podcasters out there listening, and maybe they're editors as well, what are some important things you think people should think about when editing audio content?
Well, first, yeah, thank you, Doug. I feel very fortunate and grateful to be the editor of Autism Stories, and so thank you for saying that first. And beyond that, what I'll share is my philosophy, kind of the way that I think about it and approach it, and yeah, and if it resonates with people or somebody, yeah, I hope that it will be useful. One of the things that I discovered about myself is the closer I keep things to what is authentically interesting and inspiring to me, the more I feel like I deliver something of quality. And I think that probably sounds pretty obvious, but when we first talked and you wanted to have me come on and edit, I really started thinking about, what do I want to bring to this show? What can I contribute into this formula and all these, everyone contributing to the episodes? What can I bring that is going to make the experience better for the listeners and exciting for the other people who work on autism stories? And for me, I am very interested in storytelling, and I'm very interested in the sense of connection that people can feel through people telling their stories, or in the case of autism stories, a conversation between you and whoever is on at the time. So kind of through the lens of how can I make this experience feel rich for people, have a sense of connection, have a sense of togetherness. I approached it through my interest in production, and in this case sound, and the question was, how can I take these recordings that I'm getting and turn that into something that really brings people in and makes them feel like a part of the conversation. And so in terms of editing, every episode, my goal is to try to make it feel as close to being experiencing this organic conversation between two people in like a physical space. So beyond just editing, the stuff that needs to get edited out, I try to bring in sound design each time, where I process, your voice, the host, as well as the guest, and I try to make them sound as natural as possible. And I use, some different sound design and audio editing techniques to remove the kind of try as much as I can to remove the sense that the listener is listening to something that's been recorded over a computer and etc. And I want it to sound and feel as though, to the greatest degree that I can, that the person is sitting in the room listening to this conversation happening. And there's certain things, like I add a very subtle amount of room reverb. So it sounds like even though the guest and you are recording in separate locations, sometimes on literally different continents, I will put your voices together and have them reverberate, bounce off the walls of a space together. So from the point of view of the listener, my hope is that unconsciously it will feel like you and that person are sitting in the same space talking together. And I'll do little things like I'll use plugins to put a little bit of warmth back into the recording, because digital recording can have a tendency to make things sound a little distant and a little less natural than standing in front of somebody or being in a room with somebody and conversing. So that's just the way that I think about it, and I hope that may resonate with somebody or help them. But yeah, overall, I just want it to be the most organic and natural thing that it can be, in hopes that it fosters a sense of connection and togetherness, and that's kind of the way that I think about it.
Over this last year, from spending all of these countless hours editing autism stories, are there particular stories that have had maybe a more significant impact on your life that you've edited?
Yes. Well, first, before I go into specific examples, I've noticed that it is very, in a very good way, it's impactful to every week. I'm while I'm editing and sitting with the material for the episode, I'm getting to hear somebody's story, and a lot of times, those stories really resonate with my experience, and every episode on some level it's validating, just as an individual, but also as somebody as part of the autistic community. And I think just showing up every week and hearing people tell their stories and working on them, I think that in itself is really healing, and it's been really important, and it's been meaningful. In terms of specific examples, yeah, I would definitely say there's a couple that come to mind. I really enjoyed working on Naisha's most recent episode. She's my coach, and someone who's become a really important person in my life, and I'm very grateful for her presence in my life. And just in a sense, that felt meaningful because I almost felt it was an opportunity to give back. She was telling her story and talking about what she wanted to say, and so for me to be able to work on that and really try to make it the best episode that I knew how to make it, that felt really meaningful. And also, another one that came to mind was Chin-Hee Park's episode. That was really, really neat. But yeah, one of the things that I am absolutely most fascinated by is things that are considered to be paranormal or unusual, or abilities or experiences that fall outside of what is commonly thought of as quote unquote ordinary human abilities. And Chin-Hee's discussion on mediumship, I that was I was so pleasantly surprised when I was listening to the episode and editing it to hear that. And it was a moment for me where I it was this feeling that everything kind of fits together, and all my interests and my story, that everything kind of cohesively makes sense. Because a couple years prior to working on Autism Stories, I really, really deeply began exploring spirituality, I got very, very, very interested in hearing near-death stories, and like people who've had near-death experiences, and people who've had out-of-body experiences, and listening to mediums, and really broadening the sense of what, at least the way that I was raised, what I believed reality to be, what the limits of reality were. And yeah, I very, very fascinated by mediumship and intuitive abilities. And so that was just a really neat moment where I just saw these different elements of things converging. I was working on Autism Stories and hearing people share their stories, and also then mediumship and intuitive abilities are coming in, and it just kind of, everything felt like it was kind of coming together. It felt, trying to think of a good way to communicate that thought, but it just kind of felt like my journey and what fascinates me, that I was in the right place, and everything, I was connected with people who were resonating in a similar way, who had similar experiences, and that's what comes to mind.
Now, beyond Autism Stories, you work with storytellers across a range of mediums. What would you like storytellers to know about how you can help them better tell their stories?
Sure. Well, first I'll say a little bit more about kind of what I view as what I've been building for quite a long time and developing these skills. Like I said, growing up, I really didn't have a lot of opportunities to develop what felt really foundational to me in terms of my interests and the skill sets I would need. And so for the past several years, pretty much since I turned 30 and decided I really wanted to go for it, I've been developing my skills as a digital sculptor and an environment artist. And I've also been playing and composing music for a pretty good while. I started when I was 23. And that combines a lot of different things, and it combines sound and imagery and different mediums and approaches to things. And in terms of storytelling and what is coming up, I think, or what I'm hoping to see, I know we'll end up talking more about this later, but I'm hoping that what is happening with AI can go down a path that ultimately allows more people to tell their stories more effectively and with less limitations and with less gatekeeping than ever before. And I'll save a lot of the AI stuff for later. But what I'm really, really, really hoping to see in the world is, yeah, more people being free to do things in ways that haven't been possible before, and not have to go through systems that may shut them down or keep them out or say your story's not worth telling, or we're not interested in that, whatever. And I don't know for sure exactly what's going to happen, because I think that there seems to be two pathways that at least from my perspective I'm seeing pretty clearly. One is of openness and sharing and community. That being, with a lot of the AI related stuff happening, the open source community, people who are sharing things and making access to the source code publicly available, and allowing people to iterate and build and do whatever they want to do with it. And from my point of view, with what I've been exploring for the past couple years, which has been trying to build systems where the AI sits at the heart of it, and is able to render the imagery and things like that. But I'm putting in my own artwork into it. For instance, my digital sculptures become the characters. My environment paintings become the still frames that become video shots of a short film, and my own music scores it. So what I'm trying to do, and with the open source stuff, is use that to free me to tell stories without having to pay tons of money or have to go through studios and things like that. And if momentum keeps going with the open source stuff, I definitely can imagine people being, from their laptop or their home computer or whatever, being able to tell stories with great visual fidelity and really getting to explore their voices as storytellers in a way that hasn't been possible before. And I hope that's the case, but of course, there's also the other side of the coin where, as things often go, large corporations are trying to keep AI behind closed doors and limit access and limit what's possible, and try to kind of hoard that to themselves to maintain power and control. So, and I definitely, I only have my point of view on what's happening, but for storytellers out there, and what I'm personally hoping to contribute to, is I hope the coming of a time where lots of people who maybe haven't had the opportunities, or under the way things have been wouldn't have the opportunities to tell their stories in the way they want to tell them, uncompromised and fully authentic, will have the opportunity to do so across a wide range of mediums, however you want to do it, however conventional or unconventional that it is. So that's really what I'm hoping to see.
I love that because, there's been over 400 episodes now here on Autism Stories, and there's been, I'd say, several occasions where I reached out to people to invite them to be on Autism Stories, and people said to me, "Are you sure you want to interview me?" And my response to them and my message to everyone is, everyone's story is worth telling. I don't care if you're not on social media or you have 10,000 followers, 100,000, over 1 million. I think everyone's story is so important to hear, because lived experience is the most important experience. And I think everyone having the opportunity to share that is really critical.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I really, really hope we're moving into a time where more voices are, going to be heard. And yeah, I completely agree. I think everyone has a rich, deeply felt, lived experience, and every experience is valid. I definitely feel that way.
Now, you mentioned AI, and I know AI and the ethical uses of AI to preserve the voices of creators and not replace them is important to you. What are some factors to consider when people are using AI to tell stories in an ethical way?
Well, again, I'll speak from where I'm at and my experience with this and what I'm trying to do. And at first, I'll say that I think it was about the end of 2022 when AI really had its like big mainstream moment with the image generators and things like that really come bursting into. They just had reached this level of ability to generate these stunningly realistic images, and people were just, you can just text prompt it, describe what you want to see via text, and it processes and gives you the image. And I remember being really amazed by that because it's a form of CG. It's a computer generated image, but to me it could feel and look in a way that was so much more realistic and so much more evocative in a lot of instances than I felt computer generated graphics had ever been able to do. And that really spoke to me in that with what I'm interested in, which is creating films or short films where, like I said, where I'm using my digital sculptures to be the characters, and I'm wanting to create environments and shots through digital art forms. To be able to have something that really could make things look like, if I wanted, as real as a photograph, that was incredibly interesting, incredibly exciting. However, as many people, as many people have talked about and observed, despite how powerful that core technology may be, I'm in agreement with most people, or at least most artists that I've talked to, that the way the technology is being implemented is very troubling. Again, from my point of view, it's not being put out there into the world to assist people in an artistic process, but to circumnavigate the whole process and to be able to circumnavigate, artists in general. Kind of, I think most people who are interested in AI have heard, the different stories and are probably aware of a lot of the discussion and the conversation on what's problematic, and the stories about artists having their portfolio scraped without consent, and then having those images trained into a model that can create work that looks just like theirs, and without their participation at all. And so I'm definitely in agreement that I think that the way the technology is being implemented and the way that it's showing up, culturally is really troubling. And so what I'm trying to do in terms of trying to be more ethical is, like I said, I'm using open source tools and open source AI to build my own systems with an application called Comfy UI, that essentially I can use my own art to drive it. I start out with a painted sketch of a city on a mountaintop with clouds rushing over it, and I'll take that painting layer by layer and then put that into an AI where the AI is set up to follow my brush strokes as closely as it can, use the color palette that I've used, basically take what I've done and then translate that and reprocess that into something that looks like a photograph, because that's what I'm personally going for. Like, I want my work to look like a highly stylized photograph. But like I said, I want to have control over the composition and the subject matter and the colors and the characters. And so to me, I guess ultimately time will tell, but that's kind of my middle ground for wanting to incorporate, or wanting to use what AI is capable of doing and find a way to do it that is more about contributing to my process and being a part of the expression of my voice as an artist and as a storyteller, than totally eliminating it. And again, I guess if there was something that I would express to people who are interested in this is, that I personally think AI is incredible, and I think it has incredible potential, and I think that I've encountered a lot of fear around it. A lot of artists I've talked to, they absolutely hate AI, and they want nothing more for it just to go away, to be some trend that we move past. And but again, from my point of view, I really don't think that's gonna happen. I think that it's a part of the world, and I think that it's an incredibly capable technology, and it's just getting more and more powerful, literally day to day, week to week. It moves at a very, very fast pace of development, and I think instead of a point of view of fear and wishing it would go away, and that the way that things have been will just, keep on, and AI won't have to interfere with it. I think instead of taking that point of view, I really think it may be more beneficial to look for opportunities on how to kind of steer the ship in a more positive direction, and also find ways that really can change things for the better. So that's kind of the spirit I'm trying to approach it with. And like I said, kind of my thing is I want to use my own artwork and my own skill to drive the AI, and ultimately, kind of back to what may benefit storytellers is like kind of the way that things have been with computer generated artwork for roughly the last 30 years is very, very, very technically demanding. It's very limiting. If you're doing something really complex, often it takes a really powerful computer that can be very expensive to have to do that stuff. There's all these steps and hoops you have to jump through, and for instance, the very best digital sculpting program in the world has a reputation for just being so clunky and so unfriendly to the user, and the CG as it exists today, I think, is very, very limiting. And I think AI has the potential to come in and remove a lot of those limitations and allow artists to work more freely. And so, yeah, if there's people listening who are really interested in AI and the potential of what it can do artistically, yeah, I definitely think looking for more opportunities to use it in ethical ways, to incorporate it in an artistic process, and to help kind of steer that ship in a positive direction, putting things out there to kind of demonstrate more and more what's possible and how it can be helpful and kind of disrupt in a lot of ways where things have been headed, where it just replaces artists and replaces human storytellers. So that's the angle that I'm trying to come at it from.
Early in our conversation, you mentioned the importance of spirituality in your life. And I think when we think about spirituality, it's easy to have very different definitions, as I don't think it's something that in many ways can easily be defined. So for you in your life, how do you define spirituality?
Yeah, thank you for asking. That's a very interesting question. So for me, the way that I define it, it's really the exploration of a deeper understanding of reality. Just the reality of my experience in the world that I live in. And it's one of those things where I imagine you probably can relate. It can be very hard to put these things into words, but I will do my best. Yeah, but I grew up raised Christian, and my family was Christian, and when I was about 17 or 18, I started to realize that a lot of that really just didn't make a lot of sense to me, and it didn't resonate. And also I want to say too, like, this is my personal experience, and I definitely do not want to present this as though I think it is like these are the answers to the questions. These are just where I'm currently at in my experience. So, but yeah, around 17 or 18, I really doubted and questioned what I was raised to believe, and that led me to being an atheist for quite some time. And I really thought that the nature of the universe was just little tiny particles and quarks, and it's this great kind of soup of matter bumped into itself and configured into things, and everything kind of blossomed out of that. And I honestly just didn't really find that to be very satisfying, and it felt very confusing to me. Kind of this idea that modern day science had all the answers, and at a certain point, I think something just kind of started opening up in me where like I said earlier, I think it was 2018, and I just really found myself starting to gravitate towards the experiences of people who've had near-death experiences. And there was something very, very fascinating about that. And maybe I was just more ready to embrace it. I remember earlier in my life as a kid, I had seen some shows where people who said they had near-death experiences were telling their stories. And I remember thinking just kind of what I was told to think, by people around me. And I just thought, wow, these people, it's so sad. They died for a while, and their brains went, started firing off all these signals and chemicals, and they had these vivid hallucinations. And wow, that's really sad. So that's kind of the way I thought about those things. But then later in life, like I said, maybe I was just more ready. I really felt captivated by those, and I really started to wonder, maybe there's a lot more to reality than I'm aware of, or maybe kind of these commonly held beliefs about what is, and maybe that stuff isn't so true. And I think that I've found a part of myself that really wanted to just explore and be open to things, and and look at myself in a different way too. And I wanted to listen to people's stories about the experiences that they've had or their views on reality, and really consider what they're saying, and really try to imagine the point of view of that person and be open. And ultimately, that's really led me on a multi-year path of, I think for me, in talking about kind of like a spiritual path, expanding the bounds of what I personally believe reality to be, and really going back and questioning a lot of those narratives that I was told. For instance, we were talking about mediumship earlier. When I was growing up, the message that I absorbed was, well, mediums are just, they're really good at tricking people. They ask lots of questions that, that everyone can relate to, and they have ways of pulling information out of you and then twisting it into something that makes it seem like they really know what they're talking about. But what I've really found, and I guess I'll just talk about what's really interesting to me at this time, is that I've been attending a mediumship practice circle. Yeah, it's really cool. And I went with the sense of, I don't know what will happen. I think mediumship, kind of by this point in my journey, I totally had accepted that mediums are very real. And this is, and I'm so fascinated to witness that and experience it. And I didn't really think anything was going to happen with me personally, but it was a mediumship practice circle, so I was encouraged to practice. And long story short, I started to have these experiences where there would be somebody in the group who was highlighted as everyone was going to give readings to this person, just see what came, and they would respond back if it resonated. And when it was my turn, for instance, I'll just use one that really sticks out to me. I was looking at this person, and in my mind's eye, I just kept seeing this figure eight, like this infinity symbol. And even my eyes were moving in that pattern. And so I went with what I was feeling, and all I could see of this person was just, their torso and their head on the, what I could see of what their camera was pointed at. And I described to them what I was seeing and what I was feeling. And they just looked, they looked amused and interested. And then from where I absolutely could not see previously, they pulled out this notebook that was filled with infinity signs and figure eights. And they told me that they've been meditating and doing these figure eights and drawings, and that it's been something that's been really important to them, and they've been trying to figure out what it means and why they're doing it. And that was not something that I could have known. And kind of I've had more experiences like that in the practice circle. And what, to me, in my experience, that reveals is, at least, again, just from my point of view, that I'm really wondering if we all have those abilities, that we all have the intuitive abilities, that we're all able to retrieve information in a way that is not through a rational, logical process. That mediumship and intuitive abilities, that perhaps I'm wondering if that is just a part of humanity. That, I mean, the stories have been around forever, and I just think that I'm really trying to open myself up to more and more of the possibility of just continue to expand the bounds of reality, and just continue to explore and continue to listen to people's stories and continue to see what elements of myself may exist that maybe I haven't explored or cut myself off from the possibility of. And yeah, I could easily talk about these things for a very, very long time, but I think that's probably a decent place to stop. But yeah, but just to kind of sum up, I view my spiritual exploration as continued exploration of the nature of myself and others, and just wanting to continue to push those boundaries out and see what's really there.
That's fascinating because I had no idea that you were taking such a kind of a class or circle. Because my spouse is a psychic medium, and she every Wednesday has a class to help people kind of develop their skills. It's a free online class. Um,
Cool.
yeah, it's called Omni Mystics Down the Rabbit Hole. Um, so those experiences, hearing this from you, and I would say that not all psychic mediums are made equally. Just like every coach isn't made equally, just like every therapist isn't made equally, kind of
Yeah.
those types of things. But yeah, from her, I've seen very much a real experience. Many times. So, yeah, definitely we'll want to talk to you more about this down the road. And lastly, Anthony, how can our listeners learn more about you and your services beyond this interview?
Well, I am on social media. My Instagram is Anthony underscore Leckie. I imagine there'll be links in the description. But probably the main spot that I really put the most work into is my website. It's just all one word, anthonyleckie.com. It's Leckie. I'm continuing to expand that, but it's got a lot of where I'm putting my work. I'm adding a news section where I'll keep posting what I'm up to for people who are interested. And I'm also on YouTube. Again, I believe it's Anthony underscore Leckie. And if you'd like to learn more about me, those are good places to go.
Well, Anthony, whether it's behind the camera editing or in front of the camera talking to you, you're always great. Thanks so much for making time to talk with me today.
Oh, thank you so much, Doug. I really appreciate it, and I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks so much to Anthony for the conversation. To learn more about Anthony, please check out the link in the podcast description for this episode. We always love hearing from you and would especially love to hear from you relating to this episode regarding what's your stance on AI and how do you think it's impacting the world? Did you know Autism Personal Coach provides neurodiversity affirming support by autistics for autistics? We empower autistic adults and teens to be the best version of their authentic selves through customized life coaching and community groups. We also offer support to parents and partners of autistic people by providing insights and guidance to bridge communication gaps and nurture mutual understanding. So please visit autismpersonalcoach.com to begin your experience of judgment-free coaching rooted in empathy, expertise, and respect for autistic identity. Until next time, I'm Doug Bletcher of Autism Personal Coach. Talk to you then.